Islam, Islam, Islam. This is Sherece L. All Liberties Reserved fam. Um, I want to get started by reading a warning from the Prophet, as we typically do. Right. And it states, I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical, agitating speeches while at work, in their homes or on the street. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold uh, malicious feelings towards the temple or the prophet or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the laws as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Ali, and if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out the divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Islam. All right, I hope everyone is well. Um, Sis, you still there with me? Okay, cool, cool. Just making sure the connection is straight. And I thank you for lending me your energy. Wanting to be sure you are in attendance for the class. Um, so let me just continue with where we left off at, right? So we were discussing the key, and we were pretty much at a point where we were breaking down different um, energies, the feminine and the masculine energies, right? Which all living things are comprised of. And what it comes down to, well, first off, you know what? Let me let me get into this discussion first, and then we'll get into the tea. What I do want to speak about in regards to what I do want to speak about is the Dakota pipeline. Because there's been some protest activity that I've seen that people are basically complaining that even after the president Obama uh, he voiced what he wanted, his action that he wanted to be executed in regards to the pipeline construction that's going on, but people are still um, pressing through with the operation, right? And what people don't understand regarding the Dakota pipeline is what it's a business deal. Everybody at this point should understand that the U.S. is a corporation, all right? They don't have um, real government power. They don't have real. They're all private corporations dealing in business. And unfortunately, right now, you have these private corporations operating as government, um, along with other private corporations that are implementing certain things on our land that we, as the Aboriginal Indigenous people, don't necessarily want, right? So now, what I want to get into is I want people to understand the effects of the discovery doctrine, as well as a case law where the discovery doctrine was used in order to adjudicate a case. All right. Now, what's critical about this for people to understand is that when it comes to this de facto government, they one of the veils that they use is this whole separation of church and state, right? So for there to be a separation of church and state, and a judge, a chief judge, John Marshall, as you're gonna learn, as you go through the case law, he utilizes the doctrine of discovery in order to um, rule that the tenant who was on land that received land from one of the tribal nations back in the 1700s, the 1770 or such like that. I can't remember the exact date offhand, but with that case, he says that the land, um, he says that the title that he received from the land, for the land, excuse me, from the so-called Indian, the tribes that was on the land, it says that it's not official because of the fact that those tribes did a treaty with the U.S. in which they are seen as dependent nations of the United States. So this is where you get into understanding why they call those Indian, the locations where those so-called Indians are, they call those reservations. Like they're occupying the land, but they don't necessarily own the land. So now when you have corporations ready to do what they want to do to the land, you have the tenants on the land complaining about the activity that's being done, right? But overall, the owner of the land, which is ultimately the crown, because that's where all these corporations go to, answer to, they pay tribute to. That's where all that's the crown is the head, right? So now, the operations of the crown is what is keeping, excuse me, the obligation or the mission of the crown is for the activity to commence. And since they're the ones who are claiming possession of the land because the Aboriginal and Indigenous people are in a wrongful standing when they try to fight for the land, they are then somewhat pushed aside and disregarded as far as their feelings and what it is that what it is that their intent for the land is. You see, so we're gonna get into that. Let me just open this up really quick so that well, first, let me open this up because I want to read something along with you guys. I'm gonna break it down as I go, as I typically do, so that everybody can follow along and understand where I'm coming from. All right, so all right, so here we have an article by Steve Newcomb, and it is entitled "500 Years of Injustice: The Legacy of 15th Century Religious Prejudice." All right, it starts off by stating, when Christopher Columbus first set foot on the white sands of Gahana, Ganahana Island, he he performed a ceremony to, quote, take possession of the land for the King and Queen of Spain, acting under the international laws of Western Christendom. Although the story of Columbus' discovery was taken on um, mythological proportions in most of the Western world, few people are aware of his act of possession was based on a religious doctrine now known in history as the Doctrine of Discovery. Even few people realize that today, 5 centuries later, the U.S., the United States government still uses this archaic Judeo-Christian doctrine to deny rights to Native American Indians. All right. So just to start off, it's important to note there is connotative linguistics in this, but understanding the timeline, understanding who the true Aboriginal Indigenous peoples are, you know that they're talking about the Al-Moroccans here in northwestern Mexico. All right. Now, as well as other as well as other our other Moorish cousins, you know, in South America and Central America as well, you know. But to continue, it says origin of the doctrine of discovery. To understand the connection between Christendom's principle of discovery and the laws of the United States, we need to begin by examining a papal document issued 40 years before Columbus's historic voyage in 1492. Excuse me, his historic voyage in 1492. In 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued to King Alfonso V of Portugal the bull Lamentis Pontifex, declaring war against all non-Christians throughout the world, and specifically sanctioning and promoting the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of non-Christian nations and their territories. All right, this is 1452. Right, so that's 40 years prior to Christopher Columbus even having an idea or inkling of an idea to come over here. Right. We were discussing previous about the pagans, right? How Christians looked at pagans, and pagans basically mean those who are not of the Christian faith, or those faiths that would be deemed the main religion, the main worldwide religion, right? That's what a Christian would call people who don't believe in their religion, right? They call them pagans. And ultimately, when you go back to what pagan means, it means farmer. You see what I'm saying? To somebody who works the land, somebody who cultivates, you know, understands herbs and things like that. You know, you really get into the history of that. But those pagans include, you know, people such as like the Saracens and things like that, who then subscribe to the Christian doctrine. All right. So these are the people who the Pope was issuing, who Pope Nicholas V issued to King Alfonso to go and um, pretty much commit genocide any which way possible in order to take over the resources of the land, right? So just to continue now, under various theological and legal doctrines formulated during and after the Crusades, which are the Spanish Inquisition, right? The Christian Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition is the same. The people, I believe you brought that up. The Spanish Inquisition. You brought up the Christian Crusades, correct? The Christian Crusades and Spanish Inquisition are the same. It's the same war, the same time. You know, the series of wars that was going on, and it says non-Christians were considered enemies of the Catholic faith, and as such, less than human. Now, this is funny because prior in our previous class discussion, going through the book, we broke down the inception of or conception of Christianity, how it came into existence. We understand, we broke down who the face of Jesus Christ really was in regards to let me just go back here in my notes. Speaking of Bartholomew, hmm speaking of Bartholomew the first, who basically he proclaimed himself as Suter. Suter means savior, and he officially became known as Savior when during the commencement of the first Nicaea Emencio council took place back in 325 AD. All right, Ptolemy, he took it upon himself to incorporate his legacy within the Egyptian, or better known, the Kemetan dynasty. All right. So knowing that he grafted himself within Egyptian history, right? Looking at it from a Greek perspective, the Egyptian history, he grafted himself into that lineage by deeming himself pharaoh and creating his own Ptolemaic line, which ended with Cleopatra the Seventh, the famous Cleopatra, which everyone knows about, had relations with Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. Same Cleopatra. All right. So now, fast forwarding, understanding who this character is, and then you see them constructing documents where they state um, those who are non-Christians are considered enemies of the Catholic faith, and as such they are less than human. That's a very big statement, and for that to be the staple of why these um, Romans continue to go into people's countries, people's territories. Um, you see what I'm saying? Just to um, indoctrinate their way of life upon another people. It's like you really start to see the real dynamics of things. Like, present day, um, it's not as um, evident. It's not as blatant, but it's still the same. It's still the same agenda being executed. It all it did was change its face. You know what I mean? Instead of holding us in shackles physically, they got us in shackles mentally. You see what I'm saying? So now, to continue on with the document, it says accordingly, in the bull of 1452, Pope Nicholas directed King Alfonso to quote, capture, vanquish, and subdue the Saracens, the pagans, and other enemies of Christ, end quote, and to, quote, put them into perpetual slavery, end quote, and to, quote, take all of their possessions and property, end quote. Now, once again, as I just said, you have these things being implemented present day, where it's not as bluntly stated, but it's still the objective is still being done. You still see our people being captured, vanquished, subdued. Understand the Saracens and the pagans, they claim them as enemies of Christ. Because those who really understand the dynamics of true religion, we know the Christ spirit, we know the Christ essence, we understand that, you know. But in the um, the Christendom in which was established by Constantine, right, or also known as Flavius Augustus, what he established was he took a religion that our people knew, because remember the true Christ children, the original Christ children, the woolly haired Christ children. You still see, even till present day, you see those in Ethiopia still practicing Christianity, the Orthodox Christianity, right? And they also you do back studies, you can see um back in the 3rd century, right? You have so-called black popes. You have Moorish popes. You see what I'm saying? Like this, it's very expensive, but understanding how you have the um, modern Europeans, they have this way of crafting their own into what was already established. And the way they do that is basing things upon what we have done. You see, our ancestors. So with Christianity, the practice, the orthodox practice of Christianity, um, they utilize parts of that in order to create their own sect of Christianity, right? But when they did that, they did it as a political setup. It wasn't a religious so much; it was a political setup. You see, so this is why that's where it can get confusing now, where you have people, you know, looking at a religion as an identity when it's two separate things. You know, your religion is not an identity. This is why when we, Moors, they'll tell a, Hebrew, like that's a language. That's not it's not the same. Like this, the way you identify yourself is through your nativity, and how you determine your nativity is based upon your mother. That is matriarchy. That is the matriarch order. You see, what you have present day though is a patriotic system. So that within that patriotic system now, things get flipped upside down, to a place where um, we come to something called feudal law, where now you have kings, queens, dukes, um, knights, all of that. It's like it's a whole different paradigm that took effect when dealing with the patriarchy system. You know, and understand that is what Christianity is. It's a patriotic system, as opposed to our matriarchic system, which was what the Saracens were dealing with, which was what the Sufis were dealing with, which was what the pagans were dealing with. You see, because remember, they pagan means farmer, so they were the cultivators, the actual cultivators of the land. You know, so they were in Mother Nature. That's what they did. That's what they knew. You know, but let me continue. Um, acting on this papal privilege, Portugal continued to traffic in African slaves and expanded its royal dominions by taking, quote, discoveries along the western coast of Africa, claiming these lands as Portuguese territories. When Columbus sailed west across the seas of darkness in 1492 with the express understanding that he was authorized to, quote, take possession of the lands that he, quote, discovered that were, quote, under the dominion of any Christian, excuse me, let me back up a little bit because these quotes are kind of crazy. When Christopher Columbus sailed west across the sea of darkness in 1492 with the express understanding that he was authorized to, quote, take possession, end quote, of all lands he, quote, discovered, end quote, that were, quote, not under the dominion of any Christian rulers, end quote. He and the Spanish sovereigns of Aragon and Castile were following an already established tradition of, quote, discovery and conquest. Indeed, after Columbus returned to Europe, Pope Alexander VI issued a papal document, the Bull Intercetera of May 3rd, 1493, granting to Spain, at the request of Ferdinand and Isabella, the right to conquer the lands which Columbus had already found, as well as lands which Spain might, quote, discover in the future. So now they're setting it up where, they're trying to ensure that whatever land that Mr. Columbus stumbles across or come up on his journey, on his voyage, um, those lands are now in their possession as they go along, whether what he found then or in the future. They want to say that Spain they have claim to that land, right? In the Intercattera document, the Pope Alexander stated his desire that the quote discovered people be quote subjugated and brought to the faith itself. So now with the Intercattera Divina, what it's saying is now they want to convert them. Before, within when you spoke about um the directives of Pope Nicholas, his directive was to just kill them. Kill, vanquish, subdue, just get them out the way. Like that's what the Pope told the king, King Alfonso V, right? Now with the Intercattera Divina, Pope Alexander was stating, we want them. Not only do we want you to take their land, we want you to take their minds. We want you to convert them, get them to submit to Christ. You see, that's what he's saying right now. Subjugate them and bring them to the faith itself. By this means, said the Pope, the quote Christian empire would be propagated. So see, this is their whole agenda is just to get people to subscribe to their doctrine, right? Power in numbers, right? That's what they wanted. They wanted numbers. So now, to continue, when Portugal protested this accession to Spain, Pope Alexander stipulated in the subsequent bull issued May 4th, 1493, that Spain must not attempt to establish its dominion over lands that had already, quote, come into the possession of any Christian lord. Then, to placate the two rival monarchs, the Pope drew a line of demarcation between the two poles, giving Spain rights to conquest and dominion over one side of the globe and Portugal over the other. All right, that's important to know. Um, during during this quincentennial of Columbus's journey to the Americas, it is important to recognize that the grim acts of genocide and conquest committed by Columbus and his men against the peaceful native people of the Caribbean were sanctioned by the above-mentioned documents of the Catholic Church. Indeed, these papal documents were frequently used by Christian European conquistors in the Americas to justify an incredibly brutal system of colonization, which dehumanized the indigenous people by regarding their territories as being inhabited by only brute animals. You see, so this is what their perception of us was, of our ancestors when they came over here. Whatever land that they came across and stumbled upon, they so happened to see various copper colored people, woolly hair, and they deemed us as savages, inhumane. You know, um, it says the lesson to be learned in that is that the papal bulls of 1452 and 1493 are but two clear examples of how the quote Christian powers or quote different states of Christendom viewed indigenous people as quote the lawful spoil and prey of their civilized conquerors. In fact, the Christian quote law of nations asserted that Christian nations had a divine right based on the Bible, the same Bible from the King James Bible, right? Based upon the Bible to claim absolute title and ultimate authority over any newly, quote, discovered non-Christian inhabitants and their land. Over the next several centuries, these beliefs gave rise to the doctrine of discovery used in Spain, Portugal, England, France, and Holland, all Christian nations. All right, so you see how far it's stretched now. All right, I'm gonna play a clip really quick, just so that you can see, or you can gain another perspective from a modern European himself. This is a clip taken for educational purposes only, um, from the University of Oklahoma. They were doing a class discussion on several case laws done by um, John Marshall, a Chief Justice back in the 1800s. Let's open this up and share the screen. And I'm just going to play a brief clip of this.
The court issues an opinion that finds that actually the Proclamation of 1763 was a valid bar to these purchases. That's included in about a paragraph deep into the opinion. And then over the course of about 20 pages, the court creates something or adopts into American law something that we've come to call the discovery doctrine. And the discovery doctrine says, you know, the proclamation, okay, that's a ground for denying these claims, but there's another ground. And here's what it is. What did Europeans acquire? What did Native peoples lose upon the discovery of the New World? It isn't expressed this way, but you have a picture in your mind, I imagine many of you will, of a European arriving on a beach and planting a flag, saying, I claim this land in the name of, and then whatever the European sovereign. What did that mean as a matter of law? And that's the question that the court decides it's going to answer in Johnson versus McIntosh. The discovery doctrine says that upon discovery of the New World, the discovering European sovereign instantly acquired ownership of the underlying title to all discovered lands. And the question then is,
one second, I'm gonna run that back. I'm not sure if you heard the siren go off when he said that. It's almost like ring the alarm on that, you know, like let me just run that back real quick so in case somebody missed it. I'm just gonna run that back.
Native peoples lose upon the discovery of the New World. It isn't expressed this way, but you have a picture in your mind, I imagine many of you will, of a European arriving on a beach and planting a flag, saying, I claim this land in the name of, and then whatever the European sovereign. What did that mean as a matter of law? And that's the question that the court decides it's going to answer in Johnson versus McIntosh. The discovery doctrine says that upon discovery of the New World, the discovering European sovereign instantly acquired ownership of the underlying title to all discovered lands. And the question then is, so the tribes lose ownership of their lands, they retain the right to occupy them, and they can sell that right, but only to the same discovering European sovereign. That rule, that discovery rule, it may surprise you, is still the law. That outside of a few tribes, including the 5 tribes in eastern Oklahoma, tribes and the Pueblos, the tribe, those are the exceptions. The tribes in the U.S. do not own their land. The United States owns the underlying title to tribal land. The tribes own an occupancy right to those lands. They can sell it, but they can only sell it to the United States government, which is the successor in interest to the British Crown. This rule, I think in part because we developed it so early, and it was in an opinion authored by Chief Justice Marshall, we have exported throughout the English-speaking world to other countries where there were indigenous populations.
That's so crucial to know. You hear what he just said? That judgment they pushed out and propagated globally. You see? And like and now you see how the US is set up in every major country, everywhere. This is why, you hear some people when they're protesting, they're like, how come the US can't mind their business? Why they're always in Africa? Why they're always in China? Why they always, you, why they're always in other people's business, but they can't tend to their own business. This is why.
When the English arrived, so it's the basis for the Aboriginal property rights rule in Australia, for the Maori land rights rule in New Zealand. It's the basis for Mayan land rights in Belize, and for First Nations land rights in Canada. There's also some suggestion, people have told me, I haven't looked into it, that it's part of the basis for tribal rights in South Africa as well, and in Uganda, and maybe in other parts of it would surprise me if it weren't virtually universal throughout the English-speaking world.
I mean, he goes into several other cases. I just utilize that, just to make a point of how they operate their system, how they're teaching. This is a class, this is a class that's commencing, and he's breaking down what he knows about the doctrine and how it was implemented within U.S. government as law. All right. So I'm gonna go back to the article now, and I'm gonna make you. 1 second. I want you to see how the Doctrine of Discovery gets injected into the U.S. Law by way of Chief Justice John Marshall. Let me just present this. I want to make sure everyone can see that. Okay. All right, so we're at the Doctrine of Discovery in U.S. law. In 1823, the Christian Doctrine of Discovery was quietly adopted into the U.S. law by the Supreme Court in the celebrated case Johnson versus McIntosh. Writing for a unanimous court, Chief Justice John Marshall observed that Christian European nations had assumed, quote, ultimate dominion over the lands of America during the Age of Discovery, and that upon, quote, discovery, the Indians had lost their, quote, their right to complete sovereignty as independent nations and only retained a right of occupancy in their land. In other words, Indian nations were subject to the ultimate authority of the first nation of Christendom to claim possession of a given region of Indian land. All right. So this is not naturalized. This is not naturalization. This is denationalization. Nationalization is when you. It depends. See the wording. You got to understand the wording. With naturalization, no. What happens is that when you naturalize, it is one one individual replacing their nationality for another. When you get denationalized, that's when you're stripped of your nationality. It's like it's different wording. You know what I mean? Different situation. So now, where was I? Okay. According to Marshall, the United States, upon winning its independence in 1776, became a successor nation to the right of discovery and acquired the power of dominion from Great Britain. Of course, when John Marshall first defined the principle of, quote, discovery, he used language phrased in such a way that it drew attention away from its religious bias, stating that discovery gave title to the government, by whose subject or by whose authority the discovery was made against all European governments. However, when discussing legal precedent to support the court's findings, Marshall specifically cited the English charter issued in the explorer, issued to the explorer John Cabot order in order to document England's complete recognition, quote, complete recognition of the doctrine of discovery. Then paraphrasing the language of the charter, Marshall noted that Cabot was authorized to take possession of land, quote, notwithstanding the occupancy of natives who were heathens, and at the same time admitting the prior title of any Christian people who may have made a previous discovery. In other words, the court affirmed that United States law was based on the fundamental rule of the law of nations. That is, remember, the law of nations is also known as the state, the Christian state. So once again, it's reverting back to the crown. That's what he's saying. Okay. So the court affirmed that United States was based on the fundamental rule of the quote law of nations, that it was permissible to virtually ignore the most basic rights of indigenous quote heathens, and to claim that the quote unoccupied lands of America rightfully belong to the discovering Christian European nation. Of course, it's important to understand that, as Benjamin Munzingler pointed out in the International Law of John Marshall, the term, quote, unoccupied land referred to, quote, the lands in America which, when discovered, were occupied by, quote, Indians, but unoccupied by, quote, Christians. All right. Ironically, the same year that Johnson versus McIntosh decision was handed down, founding father James Madison wrote, quote, religion is not the purview of human government. Religion is essentially distinct from civil government and exempt from its cognizance. A connection between them is injurious to both. Most of us have been brought up to believe that the United States Constitution was designed to keep church and state apart. Unfortunately, with the John decision, the Christian doctrine of discovery was not only written into U.S. law but also became the cornerstone of the United Indian policy over the next century. All right. Continuing on, it says from doctrine of discovery to domestic dependent nation. So now we're going to break down. We're going to break down the role or the status where the quote unquote Indian tribes are at right now. Okay. It says, using the principle of discovery as a premise, the Supreme Court stated in 1831 that the Cherokee Nation, and by implication all Indian nations, was not fully sovereign and may perhaps, quote, be deemed a domestic dependent nation. The federal government took this to mean that the treaties made with Indian nations did not receive Indian nations, the federal government took this to mean that treaties made with Indian nations did not recognize Indian nations as free of UDAS control. According to the UDAS government, Indian nations were, quote, domestic dependent nations, subject to the federal government's absolute legislative authority, known as the plenary power. Okay? Thus, the ancient doctrine of Christian discovery and its subjugation of, quote, heathen Indians were extended by the federal government into a mythical doctrine that the United Constitution allows for governmental authority over the Indian nations and their land. The myth of the United plenary power over Indians, a power by way that was never intended by the authors of the Constitution, has been used by the United States to do the following. A. Circumvent the terms of Solomon treaties that the UDAS entered into with Indian nations, despite the fact that all such treaties are the supreme law of the land, and anything in the Constitution against it is notwithstanding. To B. Steal the homelands of Indians living east of the Mississippi River by removing them from their traditional ancestral homeland through the Indian Removal Act of 1835. Now, when you get into 1835, what you're getting into is you're going to touch on the Trail of Tears. That's when you get into that history. When you research the Indian Removal Act. Okay, when they moved us, they were trying to relocate our ancestors from one side of the Mississippi to the other, right? And in that you have those Indian tribes who didn't want to go anywhere, and that's where war broke out between them, the two fractions, right? Then C, they use a congressional statute known as the General Allotment Act in 1887 to divest Indian people of some 90 million acres of their land. This act explains John Corlier, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, was, quote, an indirect method peacefully under the forms of law of taking away the land that we were determined to take away, but did not want to take it openly by breaking the treaties, quote. Right? This is some powerful stuff, you know? D. Steal the sacred Black Hills from the Great Sioux Nation in violation of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie, which recognized the Sioux Nation's exclusive and absolute possession of their land. E. Pay the Secretary of the Interior $26 million for 24 million acres of Western Shoshone land, because the Western Shoshone people have steadfastly refused to sell the land and refused to accept the money. Although the Western Shoshone Nation's sovereignty and territorial boundaries were clearly recognized by the federal government in 1863, Ruby Valley Treaty, the government now claims that paying itself on behalf of the Western Shoshone has extinguished the Western Shoshone's title to their land. Like it's craziness, the things that they're the way that they concocting and manipulating things in order to claim rights, entitlement to the land. You know, I'm breaking it down, showing it to you. So now it says the above cases are just examples of how the United States government has used the Johnson versus McIntosh and the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia decisions to callously disregard the human rights of Native peoples. Indeed, countless U.S. Indian policies have been based on the underlying hidden rationale of the Christian discovery, a rationale which holds that quote heathen indigenous peoples of the Americas are quote subordinate to the first Christian discoverer, or its successor. As Thomas Jefferson once observed, when the state uses church doctrine as a coercive tool, the result is hypocrisy and meanness. Unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court uses the ancient Christian doctrine of discovery to circumvent the Constitution as a means of taking Indian lands and placing Indian nations under U.S. control, has proven Madison and Jefferson right. Bringing an end to the 500 years of injustice to indigenous people. In a country set up to maintain a strict separation of church and state, the doctrine of discovery should have long ago been declared unconstitutional because it is based on the prejudicial treatment of Native American people simply because they are not Christians at the time of European arrival by penalizing native people on the basis of their non-Christian religious beliefs and ceremonial practices, stripping them of most of their lands and most of their sovereignty. The Johnson versus McIntosh ruling stands as a monumental violation of the natural rights of humankind, as well as the most fundamental human rights of indigenous people. As we move beyond the quincentennial of Columbus's invasion of the Americas, it is high time to formally renounce and put an end to the religious prejudice that was written into U.S. law by Chief Justice John Marshall. Whether or not the American people, especially the Christian right, prove willing to assist Native people in the Johnson ruling overturned by, uh, excuse me, whether or not the American people, especially the Christian right, prove willing to assist Native people in getting the Johnson ruling overturned will say a lot to the world community about just how seriously the United States takes its own foundational principles of liberty, justice, and religious freedom. As we approach the 500th anniversary of the Inter-Caterinables on May 3rd and 4th of 1993, it is important to keep in mind that the doctrine of discovery is still being used in countries throughout the Americas to deny the rights of indigenous people and to perpetuate colonization throughout the Western Hemisphere. To begin to bring that system of colonization to an end and to move away from the cultural and spiritual tradition of subjugation, we must overturn the doctrine at its root. Therefore, I propose that non-native people, especially Christians, unite in solidarity with indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere to impress upon Pope John Paul II how important it is for him to revoke in a formal ceremony with indigenous people the inter bulls of 1493. Revoking these papal documents and overturning the Johnson versus McIntosh decision are two important first steps toward correcting the injustices that have been inflicted on indigenous people over the past 500 years. They are also spiritually significant steps towards creating a way of life that is no longer based on greed and subjugation. Perhaps then we will be able to use our newfound solidarity to begin to create a lifestyle based on the first indigenous principle: respect the earth and have sacred regard for all living things. Right? So here, it really goes in and explains so much. When I first read this, I had to save it because it was just a good reference for me to um, make sure that I have a copy of. Indeed, indeed. Let me stop screen sharing really quickly. Um, but yeah, I want to go into another article. Um, but before that, like the whole reasoning of me reading this, it explains so much as far as like understanding the stance of the Indians as and it also opened up for the explanation as to why we say that we were slaves, we were enslaved. You understand? You can see like we were denationalized. We weren't naturalized. We were denationalized and enslaved. We're prisoners. Our ancestors were prisoners of war, and therefore we're descendants of prisoners of war. You see what I'm saying? It's a whole different paradigm. We were never slaves. That concept has um, been something that was indoctrinated within the school system for a very long time, to the point where you speak the truth to our people and they wouldn't believe you. You know. hmm Right. Connotatively speaking, um, we're known as slaves. But if you connotation, remember connotations is slang talk. You're talking slang when you speak connotations. You want to speak denotation, denote. You're denoting. You're going to the root. You're the actual reference of something. All right. I have this article here because that was a pretty old article. That was back in 1993, where that was written. But I have a recent article, a more recent article. This is, let me see, posted Huffington Post. This article is about 2 years old. It's going on 2 years old, and it speaks of Pope Francis ending the Christian doctrine of discovery. All right, so we're gonna go into that, and I just want to make sure I have it. 2 years ago, you know, I mean, there's a lot that he's overturning right now within the Christian realm, and it's on everybody to keep up with the real political scheme of things. Like you can't, like, yes, there are things that has happened and has affected us, but there is change that is occurring that they don't put into the mass media so that you're aware of it. So it's like unless you know about it, then you're in the dark, you know? And that's what unfortunately most of our people are in the dark regarding this information. All they see or all they subscribe or adhere to is that which they are um um for lack of a better word, trained to see. Like with regarding TV, the things they listen on the radio, you know, certain outlets, um, unless it's something that is um, something that you start yourself. 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have to go through a syndicate that is dealing with a specific agenda. It's tailored towards a specific agenda, which is the perpetual subjugation of the Saracens, the pagans, and other non-Christians. You see? So, but as I stated, the Pope, he ended it, and I'm going to read this article. I just want to pull it up and yes, Pope St. Francis, along with other delegates, ended the Doctrine of Discovery. And it says, I'm just going to go through the article. It says the Huffington Post has report on events that pertain to the extraterrestrial and jurisdictional powers of the lands colonized under the laws of Christendom. The Christian doctrine of discovery commanded the enslavement and conversion of indigenous people, their property, and land. In the 1606 First Charter of Virginia and the 1620 Charter of the Council of New England, James I granted his colonists property rights in America because the lands were, quote, not now actually possessed by any Christian prince or people, and, quote, there is no other subject of any Christian king or state actually in possession, whereby any right, claim, interest, or title may may by that means accrue. Um, English monarchs also invoked other elements of discovery when they granted colonial charters in America because they ordered their colonists to take Christianity and civilization to American Indians for the purpose of propagating propagating Christian religion to those who as yet live in the darkness and miserable ignorance of the true knowledge and worship of God, and to bring the infidels and savages living in those parts to human civility and to a settled and quiet government. King James also, and this is the same King James who authorized the Bible, okay, same one, putting that out there. King James also recognized the continuity element of Discovery, the extent of land that could be claimed by actual possession when he granted the Virginia colonists the right to own the lands, woods, and rivers within 100 English miles of round site where they actually built the settlement. Discovering Indigenous Lands, the Doctrine of Discovery in English Colonies, page 19. In 1823, the Doctrine of Discovery was written into U.S. law as a way to deny land rights to Native Americans in the Supreme Court case Johnson versus McIntosh. It is ironic that the case did not directly involve any Native Americans since the decision stripped them of all their independence. In 1775, Thomas Johnson and a group of British investors bought a tract of land from the Panakashaw Indians. During the Revolutionary War, this land was taken from the British and became part of the U.S. in the county of Illinois. In 1818, the U.S. government sold part of the land to William McIntosh, a citizen of Illinois. This prompted Joshua Johnson, the heir of one of the original buyers, to claim the land through a lawsuit, which he later lost. In a unanimous decision, Chief Justice Johnson wrote that the Christian European nations had assumed complete control over the lands of America during the Age of Discovery. Upon winning independence in 1776, he noted the U.S. inherited authority over these lands from Great Britain, notwithstanding the occupancy of the natives, who were heathen, quote unquote. According to the ruling, American Indians did not have any rights as independent nations, but also as tenants or residents of U.S. land. For Joshua Johnson, this meant that the original sale of the land by the Pankishaws was invalid because they were not the lawful owners. For Native Americans, this decision foreshadowed the Trail of Tears and 100 years of forced removal and violence. Despite recent efforts to have the case repealed as a symbol of goodwill, Johnson versus McIntosh has never been overruled and remains good law. All right, I'm going to go down. It says empathy, love, and respect, equality. These are the common denominators which cause the leaders of the world's major religions to sign a declaration committed to the elimination of slavery and human trafficking by the year 2020 today at the Vatican. The catalyst behind this meeting, which included Pope Francis, the Grand Ayatollah Mohammed Saki al-Modazari, Mata Ara, that's the 2D, I can't even pronounce that. Mataran Amiya, a Hindu spiritual leader, and the Venerable Benkehani Tuchi Nun Chan Chong, representing the Zen master Zen Chich Nach Han in the Global Freedom Network, a global religion-based network created this year with the goal of destroying modern slavery in every form, from child labor, prostitution, and organ trafficking to any act which violates the dignity or liberty of any single person. For the first time in history, major Catholic, Anglican, and Orthodox Christian authorities, along with leaders of the Buddhist, Hindu, Jewish, and Muslim religions, met to sign a shared commitment against modern slavery, which is considered a crime against humanity. We consider any action which does not treat others as equal to be an abhorrent crime, Pope St. Francis says. God is love, that is manifested in every human being. Everyone is equal and ought to be afforded the same liberty and dignity. Ignoring this fact, the Pope added, is an abhorrent crime that manifests itself as modern slavery, an offense against humanity, with victims from every walk of life, um, but above but above all amongst the poor. Francis spoke of the atrocious uh, scourge present on a large scale throughout the world under the guise of tourism, referencing prostitution, human trafficking, forced labor, child labor, and the sale of organs, a reality which, he added, is getting worse every day. The Pope therefore urged both governments and the public to take responsibility, asking them to, quote, elevate the spiritual standards of living and the vision of liberation for mankind. Pope St. Francis' speech was followed by statements from major religious leaders, beginning with the Indian guru Mata. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name again. But he's also known as Amma, which means mother, or she's also known as Amma, which means mother, in Hindi. Destroying the life of another person is an act of abuse against the gift of God. Amma stated, sitting next to Pope. We need to develop empathy, allowing the divinity within each person to be realized. For the new generations and victims of human trafficking, we need to establish a practical education that will help them develop a greater awareness. We need to arouse their dormant courage and faith in themselves to help them rise up again. We must realize that they are not weak and powerless lambs, but can be courageous lions. What we need in culture is what we need is a culture of love. As Andrew Forrest, president of Walk Free Foundation, pointed out, the signing of the Declaration also represents a moment of great cooperation between Shia and Sunni Muslims. Muhammad Ahmed el-Talib, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, recalled the words of the Prophet, an Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, just as a non-Arab is not superior to an Arab. Ayatollah Sheikh Abazir Hassan, Hassan al-Najif, one of the five grand ayatollahs of Iraq, linked modern slavery to the plague of terrorism. Modern slavery is a corrupt social phenomenon, a method of spreading terror throughout populations. Prostitution, like organ trafficking, is illegal and must be eliminated. Some existing systems are responsible for these social ills because they have not succeeded in protecting the rights of the people and distance themselves from the institutions which are just in the eyes of God. According to the 2014 Global Slavery Index published by the Walk Free Foundation, nearly 36 million people are currently victims of modern slavery. The statistics include people who have lost their liberty and are being exploited um, for personal and commercial interests. According to the International Labor Organization, the total profits obtained by forced labor in the private economy throughout the world amounts to 150 billion every year. All right, I'm going to read the quote that all of them signed. The text of the declaration, and it states, "We, the undersigned, are gathered here today for a historic initiative to inspire spiritual and practical action by all global faiths and people of goodwill everywhere to eradicate modern slavery across the world by 2020 for all time. In the eyes of God, each human being is a free person, whether boy, girl, woman, man, and is designed to exist for the good of all in equality and fraternity. Modern slavery, in terms of human trafficking, forced labor and prostitution, organ trafficking, and any relationship that fails to respect the fundamental conviction of all people are equal and have the same freedom of dignity, is a crime against humanity. We pledge ourselves here today to do all in our power within our faith, communities, and beyond to work together for the freedom of all who are enslaved and trafficked, so that their future may be restored. Today we have the opportunity, awareness, wisdom, innovation, and technology to achieve this human and moral um, imperative. Right, and then it shows the list of those who um, pledge to do all they can to make that a mission, and their aim is to end it by 2020. All right. So anybody who's talking about the Doctrine of Discovery is still um, still being enforced or whatever. This is something that they should bring up. They should bring up the fact that the Pope, along with other major religious um, leaders of the free world, they've made a declaration to do all that they can to eradicate slavery. So, when it comes down to it, you can't. One second, I'm trying to get this screen share off. When it comes down to it, you can see that they are doing all that they can to really correct the problem, but they can only do so much on their end, because as Moors, we understand that it's all about self, and you have to know what's going on so that you can motion and effectuate yourself to correct the problem, you know. But I'm going to segue from this a little bit. I spoke about this primarily because the article that I was reading from, the first article I was reading from was from the hyperlink that is found within the key by Jonathon Bey. All right, you can get your free download from MorseDirectory.com. And those who are within the active space forum, you already know it's in the reference section on the site. And as we're going along and we start to really see how these connections are being made throughout the book, you start to understand a lot more from a wider perspective as opposed to the narrow perspective that we've been um, kind of forced to look through, the little narrow lens we've been forced to look through. So once again, I'm going to go into, as you're going through the book, you should be understanding at this point the concept of as above, so below. You should understand the concept of divine order, the divine law and order. There are things that, one second, just looking for this page really quickly. Where you at? Let me just back up a minute. All right. So you see how things from the past can still impact you things from the past can still impact you in the future. And unless you're aware and able to correct these problems, you're always going to be stuck in the same position. You're not going to be able to motion unless you know yourself. It's very true when they say that our people suffer due to a lack of knowledge, because had they known this information, had they understood the root issue, you know what I mean? If they knew what the Doctrine of Discovery was, imagine the real action that our people will be taking in order to make sure they're not a part of the United States jurisdiction. You see? But instead, they subscribe to things that are set up for them, as opposed to dealing with what they've already said. When I say they, I mean our ancestors. Like, what our herediments are, dealing with our own stuff, you know, as opposed to being within that jurisdiction. They take it upon themselves to want to deal with being a part of the U.S. corporation jurisdiction, and that's the problem right there. You got it, like everything that is occurring with our people, Aboriginal and Indigenous, those who are feeling some form of oppression, whether micro or macro, from this U.S. corporation. It's because of the jurisdiction that you submit yourself into. You have to understand status is the first issue at law. So from when you do not know your stance within the law, you are subject to whatever jurisdiction applies. You see what I'm saying? Unless the individual takes it upon themselves to vocally speak and declare who they are, what they stand for, what their allegiance is, what their nation is. You got to speak up and you got to state this, because what you're going to have the U.S. do, the ones who are usurping the land, the ones who are acting as de facto government, they're going to assume jurisdiction over you. And then in that assumption, they're placing their rules and regulations for you to follow. And unknowingly, you'll do what they tell you to do. So this is why it's critical. This is why it's crucial for people to give unto Caesar what is Caesar. Give unto Rome what is Rome. This is why it's important for us to have our own businesses, for us to establish our own stuff, police our own neighborhoods, have set up trust for our children, so that when we pass, the legacy of whatever it is that we created while we were here continues on with our prodigy or progeny. This is the whole point. So now, just going through my notes right now. All right, so let's go back to the book, and can't quite remember what page we left off at, but Jonathon pretty much took us through an explanation of he's starting to take us through understanding fractal geometry and symmetry, as well as understanding the law of correspondence. And trying to find the page where, okay. Bear with me, family. I'm just looking for this one picture. Okay. I'm gonna do the screen share. Alright, so okay, good. So now we're beginning to do is to get into the sacred geometry. And again, sacred geometry, what that means is sacred meaning secret, and geometry meaning earth measurement. All right, geo refers to earth, terra, land, right, and geometry, as in metry, as in meter or metrics, right? So it's measurement, the secret earth measurements, all right? So these secret earth measurements or sacred geometry is what shows you the pattern of nature. All right, it shows you a particular series or sequence in which every living thing encompasses. But funny enough, although there is a um, similar pattern, um, they're all unique in a way where no two are the same, exactly the same. I'll say it like that. No two are exactly the same. This is how you have a different fingerprint on every finger. Every snowflake is different. You know, you see trees that look the same, but they're not the same. This is that's the concept of fractal geometry. When you get to really hone in on a micro scale how similar we are in so many ways, right? So we left off with the differences between the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, getting into the explanation of feminine and masculine energy. So what we know of these two energies, we know that it's these two energies that when they interact with each other, power emerges. There is a force that occurs. No different than when you see a battery. When you think of a battery, you have the negative and positive charge, right? You have the negative on one end, the positive on the other, generating an energy. This that same energy has been explained or expressed for eons back, and one of the most ancient symbols is the symbol of the yin and yang. When you understand the feminine principle and the masculine principle, you see that the yin and yang, within the symbol of the yin and yang, I can't even find the picture right now. I was searching for the picture, but I'll just draw it. We draw it to save time. Right. But I'm sure you guys know what the yin and yang looks like. Right? But just for those who may not know, right? Just for those who may not know. So you got the yin. Well, I kind of did it backwards because right. So you have the yin and the yang. You have the feminine energy, the dark energy, the negative energy. And when I say negative, I'm not speaking about malicious or bad. It's just a term to differentiate the two. You have neutral, negative, positive, right? So it's just a different charge. That's all it means. It's just a different charge, as opposed to a what is known as with the positive is you get a electric charge. With the with the negative, it's you have an electric energy and magnetic energy. So what the dark energy or the negative energy represents is the magnetic, and then the positive energy represents the electric. All right, and in each you can see within the picture the yin energy or the feminine energy or the negative energy. It has a little bit of the yang within it, right? And then within the yang, the positive energy or the electric energy, you have a little bit of the yin. So they're not separate, although it's perceived as separate, as you can tell by the S curve. or that motion, because that's really what it's signifying. There's a motion going on, as you can see, right? That same swirl, that swirl in the center. Um, as though it's perceived as divided because of this line segment here, this swirl. It's really one and the same. It's really one and the same. All right. Now we go into. Let me go back to screen today. So now Jonathan was going into a little bit of a different math concept, and you really have to follow along with the book in order for you to pick up on what it is that I'm going to be getting into. Because the way that we were taught math, really, it's the longer version or the long way of how to do math. So I want to show you guys some things in regards to, and in dealing with something called digital math, right? Or digital roots. And digital roots deals with casting out the 9, or um, or viewing 9 as a value of 0. 1, 2. All right. As when we get into more science, when we get to it, we understand that there's really only 10 digits, right? 10 digits, 9 numerals or numericals, right? Which is 0 through 9, right? When you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, when you look at the math of 0 through 9, you'll be able to see that it can be further broken down. It can be further broken down into 4 numerals or numericals. All right, because if you take 1, 2, 3, and 4, they add up to 10, which is really 1. You follow me? Because when you take, because remember, the 0, all the 0 really is like a placement value. You know, it's supposed to, it shows you going to another level or you graduating to another level, but it still represents 1. So, for instance, when you just take a random number, like when you see the number 400, right, or 300, whatever, you really can take whatever number you want. But when it comes to the zeros, you cancel out the zeros because the zeros really hold no value. So getting back to the root of it, you'll see that the numeral is really representing 4. Casting when you cancel out the zeros, all the zeros really represent is a cycle, or how immense the power of that numeral is. That's pretty much what it is. So when you hear people speak of, you know, if they want to go past 4, you know, involving 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, what you're really doing is you're showing a repetition. You're showing a reincarnation of the same previous numerals, pretty much. All right, and this concept is based upon um, simplifying. Put it that way, right? This concept is based upon simplifying. Some people call it numerology. Some people, there's different names for a lot of things, but all this is really doing, all you're doing is simplifying things. When you get into the book, you start to also see that numbers aren't only for quantity purposes, like where you're counting, like 1, 2, 3, 4, like you have 4 apples, 6 oranges, 7 tomatoes. You know what I mean? That's generally how people are taught to view numbers, just something as something dealing with a quantity aspect. When the truth of the matter is that numbers should be looked at as a quality, like they actually hold their own distinct character. All right. Now, I was going to get into the power of 9. Now, I'm going through my 9 times tables right now. Right? Just trying to write this out. What? 18, 27, 72, 52. Just making sure I got it before I present it to you guys, making sure I got my math right. I was doing that top of my head. But as you can see with the power of 9, right? There's a little trick that I learned in school when I was younger, where if you look at it, if you look at the value of 9, right? They go backwards. They start. You can see them go backwards. For instance, well, they just put 9 times 0 right there. All right. So like when you're dealing with the multiples of 9, right? There was a little trick where you can remember it, the values 1 through the multiples 1 through 9, because it goes backwards. So like say like with 9 times 2 is 18, right? But 9 times 9 equals 81. They're backwards. They're mirrored. They're mirrored reflections in a sense. With 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 8 is 72, right? And then 9 times 4 is 36. And then 9 times 7 is 63. Mirrored images, right? 9 times 5, 45. 9 times 6, 54, right? I learned this trick when I was back in elementary school. Like I saw it, right? Repeat game though. Repeat game though. I'll take this off just to show you guys something. I should have did it a little bit smaller, but 27, 26, 45. All right, so I'm just going through one, just a couple. Like I stopped at 9 times 5, right, which is 45, just to show you guys a point. You can continue further with them if you want to, but we're continuing with simplifying numbers. All right. So remember when I told you the only digits that we have is really 1 through 9, right? Well, 0 through 9. 0 really not representing, 0 not holding a value, right? But it's just to show a placement. That's all the 0 is for. So now you have 0 through 9, and you understand that any number past 4, so you have 1, 2, 3, and then 4, which adds up to 10, right? 10 representing a complete set, right? 10, because remember our numerical system is 0 through 9. 1 plus 2 equals 3. 3 plus 3 equals 6. Let me just put my board up a little bit, right? 1 plus 2 equals 3. 3 plus 3 equals 6, right? 6 plus 4 equals 10. So that's one complete set, right? Where you start again. You cancel the 0 because 0 doesn't really exist, and you're back at 1, right? Anything past 4, you can view that as a repetition of the 4 previous numerals. You see what I'm saying? Just because you know that 1 through 4 is a complete set in itself, right? Now, that's an example. We're dealing with simplifying numbers, right? 1 times 1 equals 9, right? 2 times 9 equals 18. But 1 plus 8 equals 9. 3 times 9 equals 27. But 2 plus 7 equals 9. 4 times 9 equals 36. But 3 times 6 equals 9. 5 times 9 equals 45. But 4 plus 5 equals 9. Right? So here you're seeing, and you can continue on. Keep adding it up. It's going to add up to 9. This is the divinity of the number 9. You can see that what you're seeing here is a aspect of why 9 is so important, as in 9 months in the womb to manifest, as in understanding why on the fez you have you have those holes in the fez. You have different it's like different rings of holes, but they all add up to 9. Right? It's always manifesting itself. Can't help it. It just does what it does, right? But now check it. That was with 9. What I'm gonna show you next is the rest of the numbers, how that works out to where they all add up to 9. Well, matter of fact, do I have it on my computer? It's very quick. So this on my computer. Pardon me for one moment. Let me just see if I can find this on my computer. No matter of fact, I think I do have it in my. That's the wrong book. 1 second, family. 1 second. Locate. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm looking on my computer right now and I don't see it. But I know I have it on my book, in my notebook, but I don't think I'll be able to present it to you guys. I think the visual of it will be too small. Let me just see. Let me see if I was to put this up to the camera. Let me just double check and see. Really quick, because I do want to get into this a little bit while I have some time left with you guys. Let me see if I can show it. Show it to you. Let me see. You know, I don't like how it's showing up on the camera. Let me write it out. I don't like how it's showing up. But basically, what I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna go through some of the mirrored reflections that you'll be able to see if you multiply and then simplify the numbers. All right, and you're gonna, I'm gonna show you the order of why this order is important. So remember, what we're dealing with right now is an understanding of fractal geometry. We're dealing with the law of correspondence, right? And we're also dealing with the aspect of as above, so below. All right. So I'm going through the multiples of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the multiples of 8. And I write it as fast as I can. 1 second. 1, 15, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72. All right, so here I have the multiples of 1 through 9. 1 times the multiples of 1 going through 1 through 9, and the multiples of 8 going through 1 through 9. All right. Now again, the same way I showed you when you multiplied 9, right? And then you added the digits, and you see how it revert back to 9. And that'll happen with any number, by the way. When you add up, well, not any number. Let me not say that. Any multiple, right? Like if you do, well, any multiple of 9, anything that's multiplied by 9 is going to revert back to 9. It'll always go back to itself. That's the magic of 9, right? But with this, what I'm showing you now is a mirrored effect between the digits 1 through 8. Okay, and I'm gonna show you how 1 is one is the opposite quality or reflection of 8. All right, so you have 1 through the multiples of 1. So you know anything you multiply by 1, it's the number it is. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 1 times 3 is 3, and so on and so forth. You get to the multiples of 8. right? The multiples of 8 goes 1 times 1 is 8. I don't know why I had 1 there. 1 times 1, excuse me, 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. But 1 plus 6 equals 7, right? Stay with me. 8 times 3 equals 24. 2 plus 4 equals 6. 8 times 4 equals 32. 3 times 2 equals 5. 8 times 4 equals 40. You already know you drop the 0, that's 4. 8 times 6 equals 48. 48 equals 12, which equals 3, right? 8 times 7 equals 56. Ooh, I want to make sure it's legible. 8 times 7 is 50. 8 times 7. What's 8 times 7? It is 56. So why I put 54? I don't know. Sorry about that. But 8 times 4, 8 times 7 is 56. 5 plus 6 equals 11, which is 2. 8 times 8 equals 64. 6 plus 4 equals 10. Right? But you already know that's 1. And then 8 times 9 equals 72. And you already know any multiple of any multiple of 9 is going to revert back to 9. All right? So now look. You have in order, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have going a reflection. It starts with 8, right? Because that's where we began. That was our beginning where we started. It started with 8. But as you go, you can see it's 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it ends with 9. It's always going to end with 9, right? Show you another one. You might not believe me. Let me show you another one. A mirrored effect with the numbers. And what I'm showing you again is we're getting into fractal geometry. If you were reading along with the key, then all I'm pretty much should be doing is bring a visual to what you were reading for you to better understand. Right? Let's do it with 2. The numerals of 2. So you got 2 times 1, 2. Just write this really quick. Two times 8, 2 times 9. Right? The mirrored reflection of 2 are the multiples of 7. And 7, 7, 7 times 2, 7 times 3, 7 times 4, 7 times 5, 7 times 6, 7 times 8, 7 times 9. And just going as fast as I can with this. Answer 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 7, 13, 21, 28, 45, 42, 49, 54, 63. Okay. So again, we're going through the multiples of 2 and we're going through the multiples of 7. Why do we stop at 9? Because that's the last digit before we go back to 1, right? Remember, the only numerals that exist is 1 through 9. So I want people to understand, oh, why don't you multiply by 12? 12 is really 3. So you're just repeating yourself. Remember? All right? Just trying to make sure you guys are following me, right? So you're breaking it down right now. And I'm handing you things that you need to know as you're getting into understanding fractal geometry. All right? We're going to go through a more extensive understanding soon when I get into explaining the Rodin coil. That's a whole other thing, but I want you guys to get certain tools and keys first. All right. So just like with 1 being a reflection, right, or a mirrored effect of 8, you got 2 being a reflection or a mirrored effect of 7, right? So now you have 2, 4, 6, 8, right? You cancel, you get to 10. 2 times 5 is 10. You cancel that, so it's really 1. It's what? Wait. Yeah, okay, so yeah. So you get 2 times 6 equals 3. 2 times 7 equals 14, which is really 5. You get 2 times 8, which is 7. And you get 2 times 9, which is 9. Right? So as you simplify your multiples, when you simplify the multiples of 2, you should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Right? Now we get to 7. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 equals 14. 1 plus 4 equals 5. 7 times 3 equals 21. 2 plus 1 equals 3. 7 times 4 equals 28. 28, 2 plus 8 equals 10, which is really 1. 7 times 5 equals 35. 3 plus 5 equals 8. 7 times 6 equals 42. 4 plus 6 equals 8. 7 times 7 equals 49. 49 equals, what does 4 plus 9 equal? 13, which is 4. Excuse me, just had a little lapse there. 7 times 8 equals 54. 5 plus 4 equals 9. And then, wait, no, it's not supposed to equal 69. It's supposed to be 56. 7 times 8 equals 56. My mistake. Really not. See, I'm rushing. That's why. That's why. You're not supposed to rush. This is why you're not supposed to rush. You make minor mistakes like that. All right. So just to show you guys the visual here, right? So you have this. You see the sequence of 2. You see the sequence of 2 that adds up when you multiply, and then you further simplify by adding the digits, right? So 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? You get here, you start with 7. So from 7, you're going to 5, 3, 1. Just off of that, looking here, going back into the digits of 2, the multiples of 2, you see 7, 5, 3, 1. You see? 1 is One is going forward, the other is going backwards. Just like how you would see your reflection in the mirror, your right hand looks like your left and your left looks like your right, right? See, it's the same thing that's occurring with the numbers, right? The only difference would be the starting point. But when you see, but in looking deeper by looking at the pattern or the sequence, you'll see that they're one and the same, just mirrored image of each other. See, right? I got a little time. I'll do one more, really quick, just to wrap up, and I'm gonna leave you guys to. I'm gonna do the multiples of um, 4 times 5, and I'll explain why I skipped 3. I'll explain why I skipped 3 and 6, which are mirror images of each other. I'll explain why. Um, I'll get more in detail with that next class, so I don't have enough time right now. But so you got 1 times 4, 2 times 4, 3 times 4, 4 times 4, 5 times 4. Right? The mirrored image of 4 is the number 5, the multiples of 5. And so we're going with 1 times 5, 2 times 5, 3 times 5. Right? And this is math that we should have known, because this is the math that Asians use. And you see how they speedball when it comes to science, and technology. Okay? So it's funny the things that we got to catch up on. It's really funny. All the stuff that we got to know to compete. But yeah, this right here is the what some will refer to as quantum mathematics. Like there's different titles for this, but in all actuality, all there really is the breaking down and the understanding of the pattern of numbers, right? Because remember, all we've been taught to look at numbers is from a quantity standpoint, where we're just counting with them like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Numbers continue to bazillion, right? Number you can't even think to want to calculate, right? When in actuality, there's only 9 numbers, right? 1 through 9. That's it. And 0 being a reference point, because it really doesn't hold a value, right? Um, but yeah, wait, let me just put this before, because I don't want to. I really do want to show you guys quickly, but I'm going to get this into this class. So 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 25, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45. All right. So now I just I'm showing you the multiples of 4 going to, from 1 through 9, and I'm showing you the multiples of 5 going through 1 through 9. Right. So you have 4, 8. Then you have 12. 12, 1 plus 2, 3. You have 4 times 4 being 16. That equals 7. 5 times 4 equals 20, which is 2. 6 times 4 equals 24, which is 6. Sorry. 7 times 4 equals 28, which is 1. Just making sure. Yeah, 8 times 4 equals 32, which is 5. 9 times 4 equals 36, which is 9. Then you have 5. 1 times 5 equals 5. 5 times 2 equals 10, which is really 1. 3 times 5 equals 15, which is really 6. 4 times 5 equals 20, which is 2. 5 times 5 equals 25, which is 7. 5 times 6 equals 30, which is 3. 7 times 5 equals 35, which is 8. 8 times 5 equals 40, which is 4. And 9 times 5 equals 9. All right. Check it out one more time. Right. So again, you have 9. You're always going to end with 9. Remember, any multiple of 9 is going to equal 9. Right? But you started with 4. That's your beginning. The 4 is your beginning. Right? So 4, going from 4, 8, then 3, 7, 2, 6, 1, 5, 9. Right? You come in here to the multiples of 5. You begin with 5. So you already see from 5, you can just see for yourself from 5, starting with 5. You see here 5. Above 5 in the sequence of the multiples of 4, the next number is 1. In the multiples of 5, the next number is 1. In the going backwards in the multiples of 4, the next number is 6. The preceding number in the multiples of 5 is 6. See? Going up, you have 2. 4 times 5 equals 2. See, so the sequence is the same, just reverted. Mirrored images. One's going forward, one's going back. Right? See? So now, like I said, there are things that are right in front of our face that we skip over, and we have to reanalyze it with a more new and updated perspective. All right? Because like I just said, we're dealing with fractal geometry, geometry meaning Earth measurements. We're dealing with the concept of correspondence, which is as above, so below, as within, so without, right? And we're going to be getting a little bit more in depth next class as I explain to you the multiples of 3 and 6. And try it out for yourself. I really do encourage you guys to, sit and see, how you can play with the numbers and really witness for yourself the patterns that emerge from the numerals itself. All right. So with that, I'm gonna close out with our Morris prayer. All right. All right. 5 on the left, 2 on the right. Islam. Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah, you are my protector, my guide, and my salvation. By night and by day, through our holy prophet, Noble Jew Ali, along with our ancestors seen and unseen, those known and unknown. Much love, Ashe, Islam. Peace.